Well, sisters, how would you respond if you had felt like a caged bird for 25 years? What would you do when you got released from that cage? Well, my guest today, Linda Magoon, will share her story of just that. After ending her 25-year toxic marriage, Linda hiked all 48 of New Hampshire's 4,000 feet peaks or higher in her mid 50s as her post divorce therapy, which was cheaper than buying a sports car, according to her. And on the trail, she rediscovered her strength, resilience, and the joy of dry socks. I'm with you on that. With each summit climbed, Linda found the strength to overcome the anguish and uncertainties surrounding the worst period of her life. And Linda chronicles those in her book called Live Free and Hike Finding Grace on 48 Summits. She is passionate about motivating others to improve their mental and emotional well being through the healing power of nature. Well, Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so you have an incredible story. I really enjoyed reading your book. I am an avid hiker as well. Well, maybe not as avid as you are, but I do enjoy hiking and getting out in nature. And so I felt your story was it resonated with me too, as I'm also divorced. So, just hearing how you handled all of that uncertainty and it was not a normal story. So I'm going to let you kind of share a little bit of that. But you ran across a lot of, challenges in your, this whole post-divorce, just your life in general. I mean, you've had some incredible, um, just a moment. I gotta try to find my question. Sorry.
That's
Um,
okay.
you had a series of events that you actually, that's how you found solo travel. So
Mm,
just tell us how that came about with your
sure,
story.
sure. I married fairly young in life, and I was fairly inexperienced in my mid 20s, not too old. And what you think is a doting husband, once you say I do, somehow and gradually turned into a very controlling and jealous husband, right?
Mm.
And over time, these are, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with domestic violence, but over time, he started isolating me from my friends.
Mm.
If I wanted to go out, it was like walking on eggshells, trying to ask him to do some, if I could do something,
Mm.
without him. He would get very angry. A lot of times he would give me the silent treatment, and would not speak to me for days, or sleep on the
Wow.
couch. And those were instead of communicating, though, that was how he responded. I think it wasn't until many years later that I figured out that he was a narcissist. But at that time, you know, I I think a lot of victims feel that it's their fault, and that they're looking at, like, what did I do wrong? How can I keep him happy? And so that's sort of the mindset that you fall into, gradually over time. And so the idea of wanting something for myself, or doing
Mm.
something for myself, uh, came with consequences. And so I had to put in my mind, I had to figure out, well, is this worth it? Is it worth going out for a weekend with the girls? And if I wanted to do it badly enough, then I would, and then I would put up with the jealousy, and the silent treatment, and the sleeping on the couch. Uh, and then gradually he would come around, and we would start talking again. And so this lasted over a period of many years, and at some point it becomes your normal, right? It's
Mm.
just like, if you put up with a closet door that doesn't quite close, or something like that. You just put up with it, and so that's what I did. It became my new normal, and I never told anyone. I never.
Mm.
I was very introverted and very quiet. I figured, my parents and my grandparents, well, it was a till death do you part marriage vow, and I thought for many years that, well, I had my marriage vow, and plus, I thought about leaving and went so far as to get the divorce papers from the courts, but it just became something like that was just fearful for me. I was just afraid to
Yeah.
do it.
Right.
It's very scary, right? Filing divorce and how are you going to support yourself? Where are you going to
Yes. Right.
yeah, all of those things. And so, very much very common with abuse victims. It's just the devil, right? It's just easier to stay married, and rather than take that big bold step. And finally, as I described in my book, I think the first chapter is called The Tipping Point. You know, people reach a tipping point, I don't know about you, when you realize it's like, wait a minute, I've, you know, I've gone through enough, and I think I deserve better. And my tipping point came very much later in my mid 50s, when my ex-husband went into this swearing tirade in the middle of the night at me, and I thought, wait a minute, I didn't do anything wrong. This isn't how I should be living. And when you go back and over time and think about how I've compensated and how I wasn't really able to be my true self, like a caged bird, as you say in your
Yeah.
introduction.
Yeah.
Uh, it was kind of a watershed moment for me. And after that tipping point, what started the process rolling for me was I met with a crisis counselor from work. We're lucky enough to have that support. And it from the questions she was asking, it didn't take me long to figure out that even though my ex-husband wasn't physical with me, I was being abused in another way.
Hmm.
And it's still called domestic violence. And even though it's not throwing lamps and plates and getting hurt physically, it's still a form of power and control, whether it's physical or not.
Right.
So so after that that was a turning point for me, because I had never told a soul what he had done, and here I am for the first time telling a complete stranger what's going on. And so she ended up connecting me with a therapist who was experienced in these types of relationships. And with her guidance, I told her, I think that second visit, I told her, this is what I want. I want to file for divorce. I don't want to stay married. I don't want to work this out. And so that's what I did. And so 6 months later, I was divorced. I think it was about 50, in my mid 50s, 54 or 55 at the time. And like most bullies, my ex-husband didn't try to pull any antics. I think I finally called him on his behavior, and we managed to file for divorce without that much. We didn't go to trial. There wasn't a lot of drama about it, and so we managed to split. I moved out. That was the first time I had really, moved out of our house. And I found the experience, it was very scary, of course, trying to find a place of my own,
Hmm.
moving, trying to live on your own now, instead of, splitting bills. Now you're supporting yourself, right? So all of that was brand new. Telling people about my divorce was
Yeah.
horrible,
Yeah.
because I had kept quiet for so long.
Hmm.
So that was difficult. But once I moved into my new place and started to get into a rhythm, that's when my world opened up to me, and that's when I discovered hiking. And
Yeah.
I had forgotten that I had liked it, because it had been so long since I really did any serious hiking. I had this old beat up backpack that I had found
Yes.
in the attic when I was moving out, and I thought, you know what, let's try this. And Cheryl, the experience was so exhilarating. I think just trying something new and being able to do what I wanted to do without walking on eggshells, and how is
Mhm.
he going to react, and ask for permission. I mean, it must sound weird to your listeners, but for somebody who was, trapped for so long,
Mhm.
it was the best experience experience, going on a solo 8-mile hike by
Mhm.
myself. Can I do this? I'd never been on a walk that long before. And, when you get back down from the mountain, it was just the most incredible experience.
It is. And
Uh,
I'm so happy that, you shared in your book how you rediscovered, and you just mentioned that, like, it was something you had done a long time ago. Like, you had done one hike. And I
Right.
love that you found that again. You rediscovered that. Now, post divorce, you started doing these hikes and you were doing them solo
Mhm.
without, having to get
Right.
consent or anything. And it, I think for you, doing anything like that it's kind of an adjustment, like you said, because it was forbidden before. You had to ask for permission. But so how did you adjust to the idea of just, I get to do this on my own terms, solo hiking, doing what you desired after all those years? So what was that sort of transformation? How did you adjust to that idea?
Yeah, well, it took some help. I no, it wasn't even 6 months after my divorce. It was in December. It was after Christmas, and I was putting some Christmas decorations away with, rolling up newspaper, and I came upon a press release from a life coach, and it was a story about a 6-week workshop called "Be the Best You." And if I was married, there'd be no question that there's no way I would be able to spend one night a week for 6 weeks trying to be the best you, right? So I was really intrigued by this. And so rather than sign up, I thought, well, maybe I'll call this life coach. Her name is Emily Clement. I'm going to call her on it's a Sunday afternoon. I'm sure the workshop will be filled, and it's a little scary trying to determine whether to sign up for this. I mean, what does this be the best you? So I thought, you know what? I'll just call her up on a Sunday afternoon, leave a voicemail, and she won't call back, and I won't go, and it'll be fine. So I call. It's a Sunday afternoon. And wouldn't you know it, she answers her phone. Oh no. So I explained my story a little bit and my situation, and she was like, "Oh no, you need this workshop." And so I signed up for it, and that was really life changing, Cheryl.
Mm,
Your therapist helps you with your backstory and kind of
right.
digs into your past and tries
Correct.
to figure out you know what trauma may have
Mhm.
had or what makes you act the way you do today,
Mhm.
while a life coach goes in a totally different direction. They meet you where you're at and try to help you determine what you want, what are your goals, and how you can move forward. So
Yes.
I thought, this
Yes.
is this is exactly what I need.
Yes.
I need somebody to help me move forward, and that's
Mhm.
exactly what we worked on for the next 6 weeks. And the idea that the universe was of abundant creativity and a mass abundance, and would uh, help me achieve what I wanted to, was just a mind-blowing concept for me. Yeah, it's just like no one had ever told me that it was okay to want, right? Because if
Mm,
if
mm.
we wanted something, we're greedy, we're selfish, we're not thinking of others. And so this was just I had never heard of the concept of a vision board where you cut things out of a magazine and you put it on a poster board and look at it every day. Never heard of that. Never heard of affirmations where you write a statement, and the statement is worded as if you already have it, right? So
Yes. Yes.
instead of writing an affirmation that says, I want to lose 10 pounds, you write an affirmation that says, I drink 30 ounces of water daily and put healthy foods in my body. And so those types of ideas, vision boards, affirmations, practicing gratitude,
Mm.
these were things I had never
Big
heard of,
thing.
and
Yes.
and I was absolutely hooked. So on the first day of class, we had to write on a post-it note what our dream was, what we wanted, and we had to put it up for the class for everyone to read and see. And my post-it, and I still have it, is hike the 4,000 footers of New Hampshire and write a book about it to inspire others. That was my post-it note. And so, other folks wrote about, they maybe perhaps they wanted a new car, or a lot of folks wanted to start a new business, quit their job, solo travel.
Hmm.
And it was just interesting to read about what
Yeah.
everyone else wanted. So,
Yeah.
uh, so that was the first time I'd ever told anybody what I wanted to do. So now I felt a measure of accountability, right? When we met each week, we kind of had to update folks on what we were working on.
Yes.
So that's what inspired me to really start hiking
Okay.
these 4,000 footers, was this accountability of telling others. And many of them, the majority of them, I did solo by myself.
Yes. Yes. I did read that. Yeah. So I think that's a very huge goal, huge dream for you to do that. And during some of those hikes, you experienced some obstacles, anxiety, even disappointment. I mean, like you said, most of them you did solo. But when the ones you were doing solo, how did you mentally handle those situations where, could you give an example of like something that happened that you had to deal with? Because, it's you don't know what
Sure,
you don't know what you're expecting, right? I mean, you just never
sure,
know. So
sure. Yeah, I have many examples
yeah,
throughout the barrel.
I'm sure.
I
Pick
don't make them.
one.
I don't know. I don't make the same mistake twice. I like to make it 6 or 7 or 8 times, just so I learn. Uh, but I didn't have a lot of high summit experience.
Mm,
Even though 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 feet doesn't may not sound that high, here in New Hampshire, a lot of these summits are exposed. There's no trees, and we're subject to, just because of our location, very rapid shifts in the weather. So the weather it can be nice and sunny at the bottom, and it can be literally snowing at the summit. So
yeah.
you really have to prepare for that, right? And uh, uh, the elevation gain in such a short distance is also very arduous. A lot of people hike Mount Washington, which is our highest peak here in New Hampshire, to as a way to train for other alpine ascents.
Oh,
It's a good training ground, because
okay.
we're known for the worst weather in the world on top of Mount Washington. It's the highest wind gust. The conditions can change very rapidly. So when I was starting out, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was wearing the wrong clothes. I was wearing, like, you know, cotton pants and an Elmer Fudd cap, and
Oh,
people are giving me strange looks, and just kind of like moving around me. My pants are falling down. But with each hike, you learn a little bit more. You
mhm.
read a little bit more. I took an outdoor survival class, which was very helpful. But I think the reason why I did the majority of these alone are for a couple of reasons. One is that I was in the process of trying to find my autonomy, and I didn't
Mhm.
want to. I really wanted to do these by myself. It was like a sense of freedom for me.
Yes.
It was like being released from the cage, right? You just want
Yes.
to fly off. And the second reason was more logistical, in that. Uh, uh, Sometimes I would go during the week, and if it was a nice day and I didn't have any meetings, it was like, okay, I'll try this particular summit. I think what was instrumental in helping me stay on this goal was that I had this huge map of the White Mountains and the 48 4,000 footers. And every time I hiked a summit, I would put a little push pin in the map and study it and figure out where I wanted to go next. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had that was a big vision board. I
Oh,
could
yeah.
hang it anywhere in the
True.
house I wanted to, right? I had it hung in my bedroom. I could hang it anywhere I wanted to, and not worry about someone seeing it, or someone criticizing it, or saying, what do you want to do that for? And so there was a real sense of freedom. So there was a sense of freedom for not only trying to accomplish this, but just being out in nature alone is just so healing, as I'm
Mm,
sure your listeners can appreciate.
yes.
It's the idea of doing something physical, maybe feeling the edges of your comfort zone, but not quite, getting into trouble. Just trying to do something new. The
Yes.
the um the accomplishment of hiking a summit, or that was in itself healing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start on a little adventure, some of these, the average, I would say most of these hikes are between 8 and 10 miles. Some are longer, some are shorter. But that, when you're first starting out, you have all of this monkey chatter in your head, like, you know how am I gonna navigate my divorce, and how am I gonna live, and what am I gonna do for retirement, all this little stuff. And by the time you get to the top, all of that just sort of falls away, right? And
Yes,
enjoy
exactly.
the able to enjoy the trees and the sounds of the birds singing, and just especially if once you reach the summit and you look over, you can look into Vermont or Canada or into Maine, and you realize you're very tiny, but you're on top of this huge landscape that very few people get to see. And if I had still been married, Cheryl, there was no way I would be able to uh,
Mm.
see these sights that I was now seeing. So for me, solo traveling, it was both logistical, but it was also a way of finding and rediscovering myself too, and
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah. So, and
Yeah.
you mentioned, I love you mentioned chapter 34, like
Mm.
why you preferred hiking alone. And you used a phrase, which I love, called, finding your voice during this process. So, in what you just explained too, I feel like there's this confidence booster that happens when you're doing these kind of things. You said it's getting you slightly out of your comfort zone, as you mentioned. You're doing something new, you're accomplishing a huge deal because, not many people have done that. So, would you agree that this was all part of you finding your voice? And now, I mean, look what you're doing now. I mean, you've written a book about it to help other people. So, I mean, I feel that's remarkable and how you've discovered that healing in solo hiking. And it doesn't have to be, many people, I obviously love solo hiking, but also solo travel, which is what my podcast is about. But it, as you didn't go far. Like you had all of New Hampshire because you're from New Hampshire, it's like accessible to you, and that's remarkable. And as you said, not many people have that access. So I appreciate this, just encouraging people to like use what's nearby is I think would be a great idea for anybody that is maybe starting that process for themselves. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, Cheryl. You don't have to travel to the end of the world to
Right.
be inspired, right? Or to New Hampshire, or uh, you know, check out your backyard, right? I
Hmm.
tell people who are struggling maybe with some mentally or emotionally, and I think just going out for a walk in nature, right? Just finding a
Yes.
nearby park, or
Yes.
sometimes, you know I there were times where I really struggled with depression, and found it hard to get out of bed. And
Hmm.
so, on those days, I would just my goal was, okay, I'm just gonna get out of bed and just take it 1 hour at a time, right? I'll get out of bed
Yes.
and I'll take a shower. Oh, that felt good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm gonna get dressed in some nice clothes and get out of my pajamas. Okay, I'll do that. And just take those baby steps. And
Yes. Yeah.
that mindset really helped me, because there were times where I really struggled, and it seemed daunting to get up and go to work. It
Mm.
just seemed like it was just too much. And so I would just break it down into really small, small tasks. Okay, that was good. Now I'm going to eat healthy food, or have, you know instead of going through the drive-through, I'm going to, make something, or have an apple, have a banana, have a
Yes.
snack or something. And then that would make me feel better. And then, just try to take that. And it was the same way with hiking. Just it seemed very daunting to hike some of these peaks are 4 or 5 thousand feet. They're many miles. I did these all year round, even during the winter.
I know, remarkable.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that.
Yeah, well, it was I only I got smart at, there's a chapter where I almost get really into some trouble, and that
Yeah.
kind of smartened me up, and I
Yeah.
decided to only do these on bluebird days where I could really have a
Hmm.
view. But it was, the same thing with hiking. It's like, oh, this is very daunting, but I'm just going to decide where to go. Okay, now I'm going to pack my pack. Now I'm going to drive to the hill and just take it like literally one step at a time. And if you just break it down into those small steps, you feel a little bit of accomplishment with each, like,
Yes.
and then and that's how I managed to publish the book as well. It's just like, okay, I'll just work on this chapter. I'll, again, I had a vision board, and I had used a lot of my life coachy things. There's a lot of woo woo life coachy tips in the book for folks. Even if you don't like hiking, it's a lot of those tips. And if you do like hiking, I provide a lot of tips, just because I made so many mistakes, and you can kind of learn from me. Don't make those mistakes. Learn. I already made them, so go and learn from me. And so
Yeah.
that's how I managed to do it. And I think doing it solo was very important to me because, as you
Mhm.
mentioned, there were times when I did go with other folks. I enjoyed their company immensely. For some of these higher summits, it's the safest thing to do. But I lost my sense of autonomy because when I went, there was never a discussion of where we're going to go, what trail we're going to take. It was, okay, we're going to do Mount Adams, and we're leaving on Sunday at 7 a.m. and we're going to take this trail. And if you want to come, terrific, and let's meet here. So I never passed that up. I appreciated folks and uh, asking me to go along with them,
Yeah.
but I also felt like these were really peak baggers, and the folks I
Mhm.
went with moved very fast, and I felt like I had to prove myself. I felt like I couldn't stop and take pictures or or admire a certain tree, or I felt like I had to
Yeah.
keep moving to
Yeah.
keep up with the group. And I had that feeling that I was losing my freedom again. It was
Yeah.
kind of weird, like, man, I don't have any say in this, and
Yeah.
and so for me, the solo hiking aspect of it was much more enjoyable for me. And I know you had a recent episode about safety, and I think there's for women who travel solo, I think
Hmm.
that's a real concern.
Hmm.
And a lot of that's the most common question I get at book talks is, well, oh, that's terrible, you were going out there alone. What would have happened, or you could have gotten hurt, or as my mother said, you could die up there. uh,
Yeah.
but which is true. I mean, she wasn't wrong, but
Yeah.
I think, I mean, but there are things to do to mitigate risk, right? Whether you're
Yeah.
hiking solo or traveling solo, you do the best you can. You carry a good first aid kit. You carry, you equip yourself with knowledge. Like I said,
Yeah.
I took a survival
Survival.
course that
That's
was just for
amazing.
women.
Yeah.
That was just for women. It was great. It
Yeah.
because it's no egos, right? We're all trying to
Yeah.
struggle to light a fire, and it
Hmm.
was so much fun, right? So you equip yourself with the right equipment, with the right knowledge, and even though you're traveling alone, hiking these 4,000 footers is so popular that if you get hurt or if you fall, somebody is going to come upon you.
Yeah.
There's
There's usually
there's
other
no
people.
question. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
unless you get hopelessly lost,
Yeah.
somebody will find you. So it's not scary at all.
Yeah.
You
Thank
do
you.
what you can to, like I said, minimize the risk, and knowledge and the right equipment, and bring technology with you, whether it's like a cell phone or some sort
Hmm.
of satellite communication device or something, and just try
Yes.
to make yourself, as safe as possible, and you'll be okay. The
Yeah.
mountain will be there if the weather's bad, and you're not having, there were times when I just wasn't feeling it,
Yeah.
and that's a, trust your
In your gut.
instinct. And
Hmm.
and
Yes.
it took some time for me to trust my instinct, because I
Oh,
couldn't
I'm sure.
discern that from fear,
Yes.
right? I lived in
Yeah.
fear for so long that,
That's true.
fear is that small voice that tells you that you're not good enough, or that you're too old, or you're too out of shape, or you can't do it. And instinct is that small voice where your head and your heart and your gut are all in alignment, and they're saying, nope, this is not the day to do this mountain. And so for me, that was a little bit of a struggle to differentiate between those two, between fear and instinct. But
Mhm.
gradually over time, I learned to trust my instinct, and I'm sure other solo travelers do too. Or so maybe
Yes.
sometimes
Yeah.
it's like, maybe I don't want to hit the road today. It's raining or something like that, and you just be flexible.
Yeah. I like to say it's like a muscle, and that you
Mm-hmm.
when you practice it more, it gets stronger, meaning like you said, maybe that you get better at listening to your gut or your intuition, or you get better at you said being prepared, right? You get that knowledge, because you learn from your mistakes, as you mentioned, or just the
Right.
whole
Right. Yeah.
safety things too that you mentioned. I love that. Thank you for bringing that up, because even though solo hiking, you're not going far, you're going 8-10 miles or whatever, there's still some safety issues that you probably need to be concerned about. It could be animals, right? Did you ever come across animals? Have you?
I get that question a lot, and
Sorry.
I mean, I hate to disappoint people and say that I never had to outrun a bear or a moose. I did run into a juvenile moose on the trail at one point, and they can be a little unpredictable, because it was in the spring, and I
Okay,
think
yeah.
the mom had just kicked the moose out of the nest and
Oh,
said, you need to go out on your own. And he was a little gangly. Moose are just
oh,
all legs and
oh,
head,
yeah.
right? It's a little gangly. He didn't know what to do, and so eventually he did nothing and then sauntered off. But like moose, people ask if I've ever been scared off by a bear. And over here we have
Well,
black bears, and they're not that, they're kind of skittish, most of them.
mhm.
But it's the moose that are
Yes,
really the
I've traveled
unpredictable.
in New Hampshire, and I remember seeing road signs that say, moose crossings or whatever. And I actually wanted to see, I mean, I didn't want to hit them with my car, obviously, but I just was like, wow, a moose. I've never seen a moose
Yeah.
live. So love
Yeah,
to.
I mean, moose car collisions are a thing,
Yes.
because they travel at night, and because they're all legs. Many
Oh,
times you don't see them because all you're looking at are their skinny little legs and
legs,
not their body. Uh,
which is huge. And
yeah, yeah, and so they've
oh,
been, yeah, moose car collisions is a thing, especially at night.
oh,
So,
wow.
but yeah,
Yes.
yeah, but just to go back to safety one more time. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
there's a lot of folks a lot of women that solo backpack,
Hmm.
and they do just fine. I'm just too old to sleep on the ground. I've done it a few times, but I think what it comes down to, whether you're backpacking, hiking, traveling, walking down the street, is just situational awareness, right? It's just
Yes,
it's just
absolutely. Hmm.
being aware of your surroundings.
Yes.
Who's behind you on the trail. Just
Yes.
just you don't have to be suspicious of everybody, but you just want to take note. You know,
Hmm.
uh, whether what I like to do when I'm on the trail is I'll play a game with myself, and on the way up I'll mentally note, I crossed a bridge here, or there was an outcropping of rocks here,
Hmm.
and there was this sign there. So when I'm going back down the trail and I'm tired and just I'll try to play that game. It's like, okay, I just hit that rock outcropping. I should be expecting a bridge next, and just being kind of aware not of your surroundings, not only of nature, but who you're encountered too. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's something I take with me, whether you're at the mall or or on the trail. It's just always be situationally aware, right? Where's you know it's just out of habit, I guess. It's like, where if I'm in a auditorium, it's like, where's the exits, what would happen if there was a fire, how would I get out, that
Oh,
type of
yeah.
thing. And the more you practice that, I think
Yes.
the better traveler you are,
And you
so.
have less fear, so you feel more confident, I think, too.
Right,
Yeah,
right. I mean, it's
absolutely.
simple things like always knowing where your car keys are. I always had my car keys in a certain place in my back. I just knew where everything was,
Yeah,
and it
that's a
just
good
makes you
thing.
more confident and just a safer traveler. Yeah,
Yes, very good.
yeah,
Did you have
yeah.
any experience, you started this in your mid 50s. Did you experience, you talked a little bit about like fear, but naysayers, like people that heard
Mm.
what you were doing and thought, oh, you're too old for this, right? Did you
Yeah.
ever come across anybody that kind of gave you that that indication that they thought, oh, well, you're crazy and you're too old, or anything that would be, maybe make you feel insecure, or just like question what you were doing, maybe?
Yeah, not during the time I was doing it.
Oh,
Never, and
okay.
never to my face.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Many years later, I would hear anecdotally or second or third hand, like, I
Oh,
can't believe you did that, or I can't believe you'd want to do that. And it's like,
yeah.
I'm sure people thought of it, but they never expressed it to me, and
Okay.
I don't know if it would have mattered, Cheryl. I was
Yeah.
just
That's good.
determined to do it,
Determined. Yeah.
and that's the voice of fear talking,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And you
Yeah.
want to surround you want to surround yourself with people that support you and love you, and that's what I've been able to do since I've been
Mm-hmm.
divorced. I've been very lucky to
Mm-hmm.
not only strengthen the friendships that I had, like in high school before I was married,
Mm-hmm.
but to make new
New friend.
friends. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still connected with with my life coach, and she created this community of women that we were accountable to one another, we support one another, and we're here for one another, and that type of camaraderie is just you can't replace that. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the type of people you want to surround yourself with,
Yes.
ones that, especially like the art, practicing gratitude, being so
Yes.
thankful, being thankful for my health. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I never got,
Yes. Right.
yeah. I mean, people ask me, well, did you get hurt? And I was like, nah, I never got
Yeah.
hurt.
That's remarkable.
I never even got a scratch. I mean, somebody
That's,
was watching over me for sure. The universe had
yes,
my back
for
at the end
sure.
of the day, because I could have got this. It's so easy to get hurt. You just slip and fall,
Mm-hmm.
and now you have to be carried out. And
Oh, yes.
I never got a scratch. I just went up and down, and
That's
like
remarkable.
that's how I did it. It was just, people ask how I did it, and it was just literally one step at a time. Yeah.
Yes. Well, the
Yeah.
New Hampshire White Mountains seem to offer you such a great space to heal and grow in different levels. And for anybody who's actually walked through trauma or grief, or we didn't even touch on what happened to your husband after
Yeah.
you got divorced, but there was shame that kind of came alongside that. And we both know, and anybody that's been through that, that this is all, it's a process to kind of move through those, whether it's trauma, grief, coming out of, that controlling marriage for you and stuff. But we all want closure in a sense, right? So that we can move forward from our past. As you said, like your life coach was helping you kind of do that, look forward. Um, what, how did you, I mean, I don't, like that's a process, but have you come to a point where you feel like you actually have closure from all that? And how long did that take you? You know?
Yeah, yeah, great question. I I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the word closure.
Closure.
I don't
Yeah.
think there, I don't know if you ever talked to other trauma survivors, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if closure is ever the right
Mm-hmm.
word.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, my life coach she wrote the foreword for the book, and I think
Oh, okay.
her sentence sums it up nicely. And it is, you're writing from the scar, not the wound, right? So I think
Yeah.
there's always a
The
scar that will
scar.
be there, and you grow around it. It's a kind of like the piece of sand in the oyster, right?
Mm,
The piece
I
of
like
sand
that.
isn't part of the oyster, right? But you grow around it, and eventually, there's no closure there, but eventually, something beautiful comes out of that. And so I enjoy taking folks out on local hikes here in New Hampshire that are just starting out, and maybe they don't have the confidence, and they want somebody to hike with them. I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
doing that. And
Yeah.
I'm also, if someone wants to reach out to me and say, I'm doing this 4,000 footer, uh, you know, you want to come with me? I'd be like, yeah, I'll be happy
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
If people are looking for an extra person to go with them, absolutely. Yeah, I'm there. And so it's that, I'm trying to give back in a way.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
That
So to answer
helps.
your question,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, I don't want to
Well,
spoil it for
no,
your
and
listeners,
let me,
but
I think in
yeah,
your book, you actually, on page 264, you actually said, instead of seeking closure, what I should be seeking is grace or compassion for the unworthy.
right.
So, I think that actually, honestly, that I think that sums it up is what, you kind of said, like closure's not the right
Right,
word,
right. You
right?
answered it better than I did. Yes, yes, yeah. So my husband, unknown to me, shortly after we were divorced, my
Mm-hmm.
ex-husband was arrested and charged with some unspeakable crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the title of the book comes from, is Finding Grace on
Grace.
48
Yeah.
Summits. Right. So, um, if it, grace is compassion and forgiveness for the unworthy. And honestly, there's probably no one more unworthy than him for what he did. But that, you know f- forgiveness isn't for him.
Yes.
It's for yourself,
Yes.
right?
I love that phrase too. Yes.
This the same thing with resentment.
Hmm.
It was just, it's easy to go to be resentful and angry and you know seething, but it's just so counterproductive and just
Hmm.
so negative that you're
Yes.
only hurting yourself. It
It's
doesn't
wasting your energy too. It's just,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
It's just negative. It's just
Yeah.
negativity,
Hmm.
and it's just not going to do any good. I think the anger was part of the journey, right?
Mm.
So, the part of the book, I detail the process that I went through,
Yeah.
being the ex-wife of somebody that was in the newspaper every other day. And
Mm.
so it's very much like the grieving process, where
Yes.
there's
Right.
shock
Yes.
and anger and disbelief,
Hmm.
and it's like this couldn't have happened, and bargaining, and then eventually there's acceptance, and then there's the grace.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, so for my benefit, I don't have any contact with him. He'll be in prison for a long time, and it just does not uh it just does not benefit me
No, it
to
doesn't
have
serve
contact
you.
with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. and
Yeah.
and if I were, it would be to serve him, and I
Mm.
felt like I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that for a long time. These were his things that he did, that I did not know,
Yeah.
and I have no responsibility for him. And just trying to navigate that court process. It was over 3 years.
Oh my
And
goodness.
during and that was a large part of the time period when I was hiking.
You were
I
hiking.
was
Yeah,
doing that. Yeah, I
exactly.
was
Yeah.
doing that, and
Yeah.
I was still doing that, and hiking became even more beneficial during that time because there were times, like I said, when there was a headline in the paper and I was kind of thrown. I had no idea because I'm not I'm not involved in the criminal process. I'm not a victim. I'm not a witness. I am a complete unknown, a complete
Thank
outsider.
goodness.
So
Yeah.
when something, so when and it would make a headline, and I was just like, how can I go to work? How can I face all
Yeah.
my coworkers? How can I face my family? How can I face my friends? And I learned different coping mechanisms to cope with that. You know, I learned to call the court to see when the next thing was, so I would be prepared when the newspapers were reporting it. You know, when is his trial? You know, when is that going to happen? And I just was better able to arm myself, so I wasn't so blindsided.
Well,
Yeah,
and
some of my
those were skills that you actually learned hiking. You talked
yeah,
about,
being prepared.
beforehand being prepared, like,
Right,
so you brought it back in to help
right,
you navigate that
right,
season. So
right.
yeah, that's a skill you learned. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, your podcast is solo traveling,
Hmm.
and solo is good, but it would took a little. It's a process for me
Yeah.
personally to ask for help. You know,
Mm,
if you're solo traveling and you're running into a situation, I don't know, flat tire. I purchased a travel trailer, and so I do a lot of trailering solo. But if you run into a problem, sometimes you just have to ask for help and not be a martyr. And,
yeah.
and
Yes.
it's the same thing when you're going through an emotional journny as well. It was hard for me
Yes.
to ask for help.
Yes.
And but I'm getting better at it, right?
Yeah.
It's not, healthy people ask for help, right? So,
I like that. I like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So whether your listeners or viewers, ask for help. There's no shame in asking for help for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for reiterating that. Yeah. I
And,
think we get this whole like pride thing too because
mhm,
we're doing this solo. We want to do it our way. We want to
yeah,
show that we can do it solo.
right,
But, even those that I've interviewed that have solo travel, one of the most important things that they have shared is not the solo part, which is great, but how they've either connected with community or they've connected with met somebody or had an encounter with somebody. So it is about human interaction and whether you are, like you said, hiking alone or with somebody, um, you know, there's interaction. You'll pass people, right? And so,
right.
yeah, I love
Yeah,
that. It's
yeah,
important that we acknowledge that too, even though we are by ourselves, that there's other people around, as you mentioned,
sure.
that we're not really
Yes.
alone, right?
No, no, on some of these hikes, I started out as solo,
Hmm.
and I would catch up, or somebody would catch up to me that was also solo
Yeah.
hiking,
Yeah.
and we had the same pace,
Yeah.
and there's a connection, and it really makes the miles go by a little bit faster. You learn things from folks that were more
Yes.
experienced than me, and I didn't. If I just don't have any. There's no pride here. There's
Yeah.
no ego in this corner. And so if I didn't know something, I would just ask.
Ask.
I
Yeah.
just yeah. I just
That's good.
I have a sense of humor about it,
Yeah.
and yeah, people are super helpful. I
Mhm.
mean, I think the traveling hiking community is super helpful. Traveling, the RV community is super helpful. Like I said, I bought a travel trailer during COVID.
Okay.
This was going to be my retirement. Was to travel in my travel trailer. And during the lockdown, a friend of mine says, "Well, why don't you buy it now? And that way, there you can at least get going with it.
Yeah.
And when it's time to retire, you'll have that experience, and you'll be kind of ahead of the game." And she was right. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I did.
Yeah.
And and I watched a lot of YouTube videos, did a lot of reading, did as much research as you can, and you still make mistakes because you don't know
Oh,
what you don't
yes.
know. So, but yeah, that's my latest adventure. Is I like
I
to
was
go
just
out
gonna
in
ask
my
you
RV.
what are
Yeah.
you working on right now and where are
Yeah,
you?
so
Uh,
so I retired a month ago. That was my
oh,
long time
oh my
goal.
gosh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Today's like the 30-day anniversary, so I feel like I'm in vacation mode. Like it hasn't
Yeah,
hit me
yeah.
yet. So yeah, so I did buy the RV during the lockdown in
Mm-hmm.
2020 or 2021,
Mm-hmm.
and so up till now I've been a weekend warrior with it, right? Because
Okay.
because I was working full time,
Yeah.
going on trips, not too far, but I go solo sometimes. I did a lot of work on my book on solo RV trips in terms of editing. It
Mm-hmm.
was quiet. There were no
Yeah.
distractions.
Yes, true.
It was just a like my little writing office, and so I just came back from a music festival over the weekend in Vermont. That
Um,
was fantastic. I
awesome.
mean, you're right. I mean, I think there's, even though you're traveling solo,
Mhm.
there is that community. There's the music community, the RV community, the hiking community. And
Yes.
as much as I like my alone time, because I still treasure it, we all we all crave that human connection on
Yes.
some level as well. So
Yes. I
yeah, so that
agree.
was the best of both worlds, is music and going to camping out at a campground. It was just a fun weekend. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. I'm so
Yeah.
glad. And congrats on the retirement. That's
Thank
so,
you.
so
Thank you.
freeing.
Yeah.
One day I'll get there, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I had been planning for it for, like, shortly after my divorce. I decided that I needed to figure this out. So
Yes. Well,
yeah,
good.
so I had been planning for the last 10 years or so, and so I fell victim to that one more year syndrome. I originally wanted to do it in 2023, but here we are. So I did
Yes,
it. Yeah.
I know other people that are in that same situation.
Yeah.
They're like, one more year teaching, one more year. Like,
Right,
yeah, it's
right,
like,
right,
yeah,
right.
I know. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy for you. Where can people find you? You know, you have a book out and I think you have a
Sure.
website. So,
Yeah, yeah. So I do have a website. I thought of this one all by myself. It's my name. It's lindamagoon.com. That's LINDAMAGOON.com. You can order my book through Amazon. If you're
mhm.
not into Amazon, that's fine. Just reach out through my website. I'd be happy to send you a signed copy. My email, I thought of this one all by myself too, is Linda Magoon author
Mm.
at gmail.com. And also, you can find me on Facebook, and that's Linda Magoon author on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, this has been so exciting. Yeah, and here, wait, while I have, um,
Oh, yep,
there's
there it is.
there's what the
Yeah.
book looks like, folks. So
Right.
if you're looking
Awesome.
for it, that's what
Yeah.
it looks like there. And I enjoyed reading it. And Linda, this has been so remarkable. I thank you for sharing your story. And I know there could be parts that kind of may have brought up some past things. So I appreciate you being honest with everything that happened to you. And your book really dives a little deeper into all that. So if someone is interested in kind of hearing all the deets on, all that she went through, it's pretty remarkable. And look at you standing here. I mean, you're here having completed the 48 peaks. I mean, that's just remarkable. I mean,
Yeah.
and
And for
it's
and for
inspiring.
your efforts, you get a little patch and a tiny
Oh,
little
yes, a
certificate. Yes, yes.
certificate.
That was my
See?
motivation. It was to
Yes,
get that
yes,
tiny little patch about the size of a postage stamp, but I needed that. I needed that
yes.
validation. Yeah.
I agree. I think we all kind of need stuff like that to
Yeah.
validate what we've done and that hard hard
Yeah.
path that we've
Yeah.
walked for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your journey with me and my
All right.
audience.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Cheryl. It was a pleasure to meet and chat with you.
Yes, same.
And safe travels to all of your viewers and listeners out there. Uh, Thank you so much for listening.
Yes, thank you.